The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace, as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood quietly by the tall windows of her private sitting room. Her fingers traced the delicate pattern on the teacup she held, but her mind was far from the warm liquid inside. Today would mark the end of an era, a chapter that had defined not just her life, but the lives of millions who had followed their royal journey with unwavering devotion. William entered the room with measured steps, his usual confident stride replaced by something more hesitant, more vulnerable. The weight of the decision they had made together seemed to rest heavily on his broad shoulders. He had always been the steady one, the rock that others leaned on during times of uncertainty, but today even he seemed to be searching for that inner strength that had carried him through so many public moments. "The car will be here in 20 minutes, he said softly, his voice carrying a tenderness that was reserved only for these private moments between them. Catherine turned from the window and their eyes met across the room. In that single glance, years of shared experiences passed between them. The laughter, the challenges, the quiet moments stolen away from the public eye, and the overwhelming love that had grown stronger with each passing day. She nodded, setting down her teacup with the grace that had become her signature. Every movement she made was watched, analyzed, and admired by people around the world. But in this moment, she was simply a woman facing one of the most difficult decisions of her life. The announcement had been made 3 days ago, shocking the nation and sending ripples of emotion across the globe. After years of dedicated service, they had chosen to step back from their royal duties to focus on a deeply personal matter that required their full attention. The decision hadn't come lightly. Weeks of discussions, consultations with family members, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. They had always known that their lives belonged not just to themselves, but to the people they served. Every choice they made affected millions, and this choice was perhaps the most significant they had ever faced together. William crossed the room and stood beside his wife, their reflection visible in the window glass. They looked like any other couple facing a difficult moment, yet they were so much more. They represented hope, stability, and continuity for countless people who had invested their hearts in this royal love story that had captivated the world for over a decade. "Are you ready?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Catherine had always possessed an inner strength that amazed him. She had transformed from a shy university student into one of the most beloved members of the royal family, handling every challenge with dignity and grace. If anyone could face this moment with composure, it was her. "As ready as one can be for something like this," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion he could see in her eyes. They had practiced what they would say, how they would present themselves to the world one final time in their official capacity. But no amount of preparation could truly ready them for the emotional weight of what lay ahead. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside reminded them that their private moment was coming to an end. Soon they would step out into the public eye, where every gesture would be photographed, every expression analyzed, and every word remembered. They had lived their entire married life under this intense scrutiny, but today felt different. Today felt final in a way that made every second precious. Catherine reached for William's hand, and he intertwined their fingers in a gesture that had become natural over their years together. This simple touch had reassured them through countless public appearances, state dinners, and royal engagements. Today it would give them strength for what many were already calling the most emotional royal moment in recent history. The weight of their decision pressed down on them both, but so did the certainty that they were making the right choice. Sometimes love meant making sacrifices that others might not understand. Sometimes duty to family had to come before duty to crown. And sometimes the most graceful thing one could do was to step away with dignity and tact, leaving behind a legacy of service and love that would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. As they prepared to leave the room that had been their sanctuary, both William and Catherine knew that their lives were about to change forever. The world was waiting to witness their graceful goodbye, unaware of just how deeply this moment would touch hearts around the globe. The black limousine pulled away from Buckingham Palace as crowds of well-wishers lined the streets, many holding handmade signs expressing their love and support. Catherine watched through the tinted windows as familiar faces blurred past, faces she had come to recognize from years of walkabouts and public engagements. Mrs. Henderson, who always brought her homemade biscuits during royal visits to the local community center. Young Tommy, who had grown from a shy 6-year-old into a confident teenager during her patronage of his school's literacy program. These were the people who made their royal duties meaningful, the individuals whose lives they had touched and who had, in return, touched theirs. Leaving them behind felt like leaving family, because in many ways that's exactly what they were doing. The British public had embraced Catherine from the moment she and William announced their engagement, and their support had never wavered through the years of service that followed. William noticed his wife's distant gaze and gently squeezed her hand. He understood the mixture of sadness and relief she was feeling because he felt it too. For years they had balanced their public responsibilities with their desire for a normal family life, always aware that their children were growing up in a world unlike any other. The constant media attention, the security concerns, and the weight of public expectation had shaped every aspect of their daily existence. The decision to step back hadn't been sudden. It had begun as quiet conversations late at night, after official engagements were finished and the children were asleep. They had talked about what kind of life they wanted for George, Charlotte, and Louis. They had discussed their own dreams and aspirations beyond the royal duties that had defined their adult lives. Most importantly, they had confronted a personal challenge that required their complete focus and attention. As their car approached Westminster Abbey, the place where they had exchanged vows in front of 2 billion viewers worldwide, both William and Catherine felt the profound significance of this journey. Their wedding day had been filled with joy and hope for the future. Today's journey carried those same emotions, but wrapped in the bittersweetness of endings and new beginnings. The Abbey came into view, its ancient spires reaching toward the cloudy London sky. Inside those hallowed walls they would make their final official appearance together as working members of the royal family. The service had been planned meticulously, every detail considered and approved. But what couldn't be planned was the emotion that would fill that sacred space. The collective feeling of a nation saying goodbye to 2 people who had served with distinction and grace. Catherine adjusted the simple but elegant navy dress she had chosen for the occasion. Every outfit she wore became front-page news, analyzed by fashion experts and copied by admirers around the world. Today's choice was deliberate in its understated elegance, sophisticated enough for the solemnity of the occasion, yet personal enough to reflect her own authentic style. The crowds outside the Abbey were larger than expected. Word had spread quickly about this farewell service, and people had traveled from across the country to be present for this historic moment. Some had camped overnight to secure the best viewing spots, bringing folding chairs and thermoses of tea to sustain them through the long wait. Their dedication touched both William and Catherine deeply, serving as a reminder of the genuine affection that existed between the royal family and the people they served. Security personnel moved efficiently through the crowd, but their usual stern expressions seemed softer today. Even they understood the emotional weight of this occasion. Many of the officers had worked with William and Catherine for years, becoming familiar faces in their daily lives. They too would feel the impact of this transition, as new assignments and responsibilities would reshape their professional world. Inside the limousine, the couple remained mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. They thought about their first official engagement together as a married couple, the nervous excitement they had felt, and how that nervousness had gradually transformed into confidence and purpose. They remembered the countless ribbon cuttings, charity galas, and state functions that had filled their calendars year after year, but they also thought about the quieter moments and the private visits to hospitals where they had met patients whose stories would stay with them forever, the community projects they had supported that had genuinely improved people's lives, and the relationships they had built with individuals and organizations across the Commonwealth. As the car slowed to approach the Abbey's entrance, William and Catherine prepared themselves for what lay ahead. In just a few minutes, they would step out into the public eye for what many believed would be their final official appearance together. The world was watching, waiting to witness a moment that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The heavy wooden doors of Westminster Abbey opened with a deep, resonant creak that seemed to echo through centuries of history. William and Catherine stepped out of their car into the crisp London air, immediately surrounded by the familiar symphony of camera shutters clicking and the gentle murmur of the assembled crowd. The autumn breeze caught Catherine's hair, and she reached up with practiced grace to smooth it back, a gesture so natural yet so photographed that it would appear in newspapers around the world within hours. The red carpet stretched before them like a path through time, leading to the Abbey's grand entrance where Archbishop Williams waited with a warm, understanding smile. He had presided over their wedding ceremony 11 years ago, and now he would oversee this very different but equally significant moment in their lives. The circular nature of this experience wasn't lost on either William or Catherine, returning to the place where their public journey together had truly begun, now to mark its transformation into something entirely new. As they walked slowly up the carpet, Catherine's hand rested lightly on William's arm in the traditional manner they had perfected over years of official appearances. But today that touch carried extra meaning. It was steadying, reassuring, and deeply personal amidst all the public ceremony. Each step felt deliberate and measured, as if they were walking through a gallery of their own memories. The crowd's reaction was immediate and heartfelt. Unlike the jubilant cheers that usually greeted royal appearances, today's response carried a different tone, one of appreciation, respect, and genuine sadness. People called out words of support and thanks, their voices creating a gentle chorus that followed the couple up the Abbey steps. "Thank you for everything," shouted an elderly woman from behind the barriers. "We love you both," called a young father holding his daughter on his shoulders. These spontaneous expressions of affection brought tears to many eyes in the crowd. The relationship between the British public and their royal family had always been complex, but William and Catherine had managed to bridge generational and social divides in a way that felt authentic and meaningful. They had modernized the monarchy while respecting its traditions, bringing a relatability to royal duties that had endeared them to millions. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was both solemn and celebratory. The ancient stone walls had witnessed coronations, royal weddings, and state funerals for nearly 1,000 years. Today they would witness something unprecedented, a graceful transition that honored both service and personal choice. The pews were filled with representatives from the many charities and organizations that William and Catherine had supported throughout their royal careers. Maria Santos sat in the third row, representing the mental health charity that Catherine had championed for years. She remembered the first time the princess had visited their center, how she had sat on the floor with children during art therapy sessions, completely unbothered by the potential damage to her expensive dress. That authentic connection had transformed their small organization into a nationally recognized resource for families in crisis. Behind her sat Colonel Thompson, retired now but representing the military veterans support group that William had made his personal mission. He recalled the young prince visiting wounded soldiers in military hospitals, spending hours talking with men and women who had sacrificed so much for their country. William's commitment to veterans' causes had brought attention and funding to programs that had literally saved lives. The Abbey's organ began to play softly, its deep, rich tones filling the sacred space with a sense of reverence and anticipation. The music chosen for today's service reflected both the couple's personal tastes and the significance of the occasion. Each piece had been selected to honor their years of service while looking forward to whatever lay ahead. Catherine took her seat in the front pew, her posture perfect, despite the emotional weight of the moment. She had spent years perfecting the art of public composure, learning to maintain grace under pressure while still allowing her genuine emotions to show through. Today, that careful balance between public duty and private feeling would be tested more than ever before. William settled beside her, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. He had served his country in multiple capacities, as a search and rescue helicopter pilot, as a working royal, and as a future king in training. Each role had shaped him, taught him different aspects of service and sacrifice. Today marked the end of one chapter of that service, but certainly not the end of his commitment to making a positive difference in the world. As the congregation settled and the service prepared to begin, both William and Catherine felt the weight of history surrounding them. They were part of an institution that had endured for over a millennium, adapting and evolving with each generation. Their decision to step back represented not a rejection of that heritage, but rather a new interpretation of what royal service could look like in the modern world. The Archbishop rose to address the gathering, his voice carrying clearly through the Abbey's perfect acoustics. This moment had been planned carefully, but everyone present understood that what was about to unfold would be remembered, not for its ceremony, but for its genuine emotion and human authenticity. Archbishop William's voice filled the ancient abbey with words that seemed to transcend the formal ceremony and speak directly to the hearts of everyone present. He spoke of service, dedication, and the courage required to make difficult decisions with grace and dignity. His words were carefully chosen, acknowledging the significance of William and Catherine's choice while celebrating the years of meaningful work they had accomplished together. Service to others, the Archbishop said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition, takes many forms. Sometimes it means stepping forward into the light of public duty. Sometimes it means stepping back to tend to matters that require our most personal attention. Both choices, when made with love and wisdom, serve the greater good. Catherine felt her eyes begin to well with tears, though she maintained her composed exterior. These words captured exactly what they had struggled to articulate in their private discussions. They weren't abandoning their responsibilities. They were redefining them based on changing circumstances and personal priorities that demanded their complete focus. The congregation listened intently, many of them representatives of causes and organizations that had been touched by the couple's dedication over the years. Sarah Mitchell, who ran a children's literacy program in East London, remembered the day Catherine had surprised everyone by reading stories to a group of disadvantaged children. The princess hadn't just visited for photos. She had stayed for 2 hours, engaging with each child individually and learning about their specific challenges and dreams. In the row behind Sarah sat Dr. James Crawford, whose mental health research facility had received crucial funding and attention through William's advocacy. He thought about the prince's willingness to share his own struggles with grief and mental health, breaking down barriers that had prevented countless people from seeking help. William's openness about his therapy following his mother's death had changed public conversation about mental health treatment. The service continued with readings from various community leaders who had worked closely with William and Catherine. Each speaker shared personal stories that highlighted not just the couple's public accomplishments, but their private kindness and genuine commitment to making a difference. These weren't the polished testimonials typical of royal events. They were heartfelt accounts of real relationships and meaningful impact. Mrs. Eleanor Davies, an elderly woman who had run a community garden project supported by Catherine, spoke with a trembling voice about the day the princess had rolled up her sleeves to plant vegetables alongside local children. She wasn't afraid to get dirt under her fingernails, Mrs. Davies said, her words carrying across the abbey. She listened to our stories, remembered our names, and treated each of us like family. That's not something you can teach or pretend. That comes from the heart. The emotional weight of these testimonials was evident throughout the abbey. People dabbed at their eyes with tissues, moved by the genuine affection and respect being expressed. This wasn't just a formal farewell to 2 working royals. It was a community saying goodbye to 2 people who had become personally meaningful to them. William found himself reflecting on a conversation he'd had with his father just days earlier. King Charles had understood their decision, even supported it, recognizing that the monarchy's future lay in its ability to adapt to changing times and personal circumstances. The crown serves the people, his father had said, but it must also serve the humanity of those who wear it. As the service progressed, both William and Catherine began to feel a sense of peace settling over them. The anxiety and uncertainty that had characterized the weeks leading up to this moment began to give way to a quiet confidence in their choice. They were surrounded by love, understanding, and support from people who truly knew them, not just their public personas. The abbey's ancient walls seemed to absorb and reflect the emotion in the room, creating an atmosphere of sacred intimacy despite the grandeur of the setting. Sunlight streamed through the magnificent stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the stone floor that shifted and danced as clouds moved across the London sky. Catherine glanced at William, catching his eye for just a moment. In that brief exchange, she saw the same mixture of sadness and relief that she felt. They had spent years serving with dedication and love, but they had also sacrificed aspects of their personal lives that they now needed to reclaim. This transition wasn't an ending. It was a transformation that would allow them to serve in new ways, while prioritizing the family responsibilities that required their immediate attention. The choir began to sing, their voices rising in harmony that seemed to lift the entire congregation. The music filled every corner of the abbey, creating a moment of transcendent beauty that captured the bittersweetness of this farewell. It was a sound that would stay with everyone present, a memory of grace and dignity in the face of difficult change. As the service moved toward its conclusion, both William and Catherine prepared themselves for what many considered the most challenging part of the day, their personal addresses to the nation and the world, words that would define how this moment would be remembered in history. The moment arrived when William rose from his seat and walked slowly to the ornate wooden podium that had been placed at the front of the abbey. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor, each step carrying him closer to one of the most important speeches of his life. The congregation fell into complete silence, a hush so profound that the rustling of clothing and the soft settling of wooden pews seemed amplified in the sacred space. William stood for a moment, looking out at the faces before him, faces that represented not just the people physically present, but millions around the world who would hear these words. His hands rested gently on the podium as he gathered his thoughts, drawing strength from the presence of Catherine, who watched him with quiet encouragement and unwavering support. Today, we gather in this place that holds such deep meaning for Catherine and me, William began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. It was here that we made promises to each other before God and before you, the people we have been honored to serve. Today we make new promises, not to end our service, but to transform it in ways that honor both our duties to the crown and our responsibilities to our family. The honesty in his voice resonated throughout the abbey. This wasn't the carefully neutral language typical of royal statements. These were words that came from a place of genuine vulnerability and authenticity. William spoke about the incredible privilege of serving the British people, acknowledging that every day of their royal duties had been a gift that had enriched their lives immeasurably. Catherine and I have had the extraordinary opportunity to meet heroes in every community across our nation, he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. We've seen teachers who change lives with their dedication, healthcare workers who heal not just bodies but spirits, volunteers who give their time simply because they believe in making the world better. You have taught us that true service isn't about titles or positions. It's about showing up with love and commitment every single day. In the congregation, people found themselves nodding in recognition of their own experiences with the couple. These weren't empty platitudes. They were specific acknowledgments of real relationships and genuine encounters that had shaped William and Catherine's understanding of their role. William's voice softened as he addressed the more personal aspects of their decision. As parents, Catherine and I have always tried to give our children a sense of normal life alongside their royal heritage. But we now face challenges that require our complete attention and presence. Sometimes the greatest act of service is knowing when to step back, to tend to the foundations that make all other service possible. The reference to their children brought visible emotion to many faces in the abbey. George, Charlotte, and Louis had captured hearts around the world with their natural charm and obvious happiness. The protection of their childhood and their ability to navigate their unique circumstances with confidence and security had always been a priority for William and Catherine. When William finished speaking, he returned to his seat, placing a gentle hand on Catherine's shoulder as she prepared to take her turn at the podium. The transition between them was seamless, a physical demonstration of the partnership that had defined their public and private lives for over a decade. Catherine approached the podium with the graceful confidence that had become her signature. She had grown tremendously in public speaking over the years, transforming from someone who was visibly nervous during early royal engagements into a woman who could command attention and respect in any setting. Today she would draw upon every lesson learned and every ounce of inner strength she possessed. When I married William, I knew I was joining not just a family, but a tradition of service that spans generations. Catherine began, her voice clear and warm. What I didn't anticipate was how profoundly that service would change me, how it would show me the very best of human nature and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. She spoke about specific moments that had stayed with her, holding the hand of a young cancer patient who had inspired her with his courage, meeting elderly veterans who shared stories of sacrifice and heroism, working with families facing mental health challenges who had taught her about the power of hope and community support. Every person we've met, every cause we've supported, every community we've visited has left an indelible mark on our hearts, she continued, You have shaped us far more than we could ever hope to have shaped you. The privilege has been entirely ours." Catherine's words carried a sincerity that touched everyone present. She wasn't speaking as a duchess or a princess. She was speaking as a woman who had been genuinely transformed by her experiences and who wanted to honor the people who had made that transformation possible. As she prepared to conclude her remarks, Catherine's voice grew softer, more intimate, as if she were speaking directly to each person individually, rather than addressing a formal gathering. "Our official duties may be changing, but our love for this country and our commitment to making a positive difference will never waver. We will simply be serving in new ways that allow us to be the parents and partners we need to be during this particular chapter of our lives." The congregation sat in respectful silence as Catherine returned to her seat, many people visibly moved by the genuine emotion and authenticity of both speeches. These weren't carefully crafted political statements. They were heartfelt expressions of gratitude, love, and hope for the future. As the formal service drew to a close, something unexpected and beautiful began to happen. The carefully planned ceremony gave way to spontaneous moments of genuine human connection that would be remembered long after the official proceedings were forgotten. Members of the congregation began to rise from their seats, not in any organized fashion, but as individuals moved by an overwhelming desire to express their gratitude and love personally. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had run a homeless shelter supported by Catherine for nearly 5 years, slowly made her way to the front of the abbey. Her weathered hands clutched a small hand-knitted blanket, one made by the residents of her shelter specifically for this occasion. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she approached Catherine with the simple gift that represented countless hours of work and immeasurable appreciation. Catherine accepted the blanket with visible emotion, holding it close to her chest as Mrs. Patterson whispered words of thanks that only she could hear. This wasn't part of the planned program, but it embodied everything that William and Catherine's service had meant to real people in real communities. The gift was humble but priceless, created with love by people who had very little to give except their gratitude. Similar scenes began unfolding throughout the abbey as the formal barriers between royalty and public dissolved into something much more human and authentic. Young David Williams, now a university student who had overcome severe learning difficulties with support from Catherine's literacy programs, presented her with a bound collection of stories written by children from his former school. Each story ended with the same phrase, "Thank you for believing in us." William found himself surrounded by veterans who had traveled from across the country to be present for this moment. They didn't need to say much. Their presence spoke volumes about the impact his advocacy had made in their lives. Colonel Sanders, who had struggled with post-traumatic stress for years after serving in Afghanistan, simply shook William's hand and said, "You gave me my life back, sir. I'll never forget that." The abbey filled with quiet conversations, gentle embraces, and the kind of authentic emotional exchanges that rarely occurred in formal royal settings. Archbishop Williams watched with obvious satisfaction, as his carefully planned service transformed into something even more meaningful, a genuine celebration of human connection and mutual appreciation. Catherine found herself thinking about her children, who were spending the day with their grandfather at his country estate. They had understood in their own age-appropriate way that today marked an important change in their family's life. George, at 10 years old, had shown remarkable maturity in accepting that his parents needed to make this difficult choice. Charlotte and Louis, younger but equally perceptive, had offered their own innocent but profound support. The decision to step back from royal duties had been made primarily to address a personal family situation that required their complete attention and presence. While the specific details remained private, those closest to William and Catherine understood that sometimes love demands sacrifices that the outside world might not fully comprehend. Their choice represented not a failure of duty, but a prioritization of the most fundamental responsibilities of all, those to the people they loved most. As individuals continued to approach them with personal messages and small gifts, both William and Catherine felt overwhelmed by the depth of affection being expressed. These weren't the formal presentations typical of royal visits. They were intimate exchanges between people who had genuinely cared for each other across the traditional boundaries of social position and protocol. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, whose medical research into childhood diseases had received crucial support from William's charitable foundation, brought a photo album showing recovery stories of young patients whose treatments had been made possible by royal advocacy and funding. Each page told a story of hope triumphing over adversity, of families given second chances through medical advances that might not have happened without royal support. The afternoon light streaming through the Abbey's stained glass windows began to shift and change as time passed unnoticed by those gathered inside. What had been planned as a formal 2-hour service extended naturally into something much longer and more meaningful. Nobody seemed in a hurry to leave. Instead, the Abbey felt like a sanctuary where important conversations and connections were taking place. William and Catherine moved through the congregation together, no longer bound by the formal protocols that usually governed royal interactions. They listened to stories, accepted gifts, and shared hugs with people who had become genuinely important to them over the years. Each conversation reinforced their certainty that they had made the right decision, even as it reminded them of everything they would miss about their official roles. The media representatives present found themselves documenting something unprecedented in royal history, not just a formal ceremony, but a genuine outpouring of mutual affection between royalty and the people they had served. The photographs being taken captured real emotion, authentic moments that would resonate with people around the world who understood that sometimes the most meaningful farewells happen not in speeches, but in quiet personal exchanges between individuals who have touched each other's lives. As the informal gatherings continued, both William and Catherine began to feel a sense of peace about their decision that had eluded them during the weeks of planning and preparation. Surrounded by evidence of the positive impact they had made, they could see clearly that their years of service had created lasting change that would continue long after their official roles ended. As the afternoon drew toward evening, the time came for William and Catherine to make their final departure from Westminster Abbey. The congregation had gradually begun to disperse, though many lingered in small groups reluctant to end conversations that had been years in the making. The informal atmosphere that had developed throughout the day had created connections that transcended the original purpose of the gathering. William and Catherine stood together at the Abbey's entrance, looking back at the sacred space that had witnessed so many pivotal moments in their lives. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the ancient windows, creating patterns of gold and amber on the stone floors where they had walked as newlyweds more than a decade ago. Today they were leaving as different people, still committed to service, but redefining what that service would look like. The crowd outside had grown throughout the day as word spread about the emotional farewell taking place inside. People of all ages had gathered, many bringing flowers, homemade signs, and personal messages of support. The atmosphere was respectful but charged with emotion, as if everyone present understood they were witnessing a moment that would be discussed and remembered for generations. As William and Catherine appeared at the Abbey's entrance, a spontaneous round of applause began that quickly grew into something much more powerful. It wasn't the polite, formal applause typical of royal events. It was the heartfelt appreciation of people expressing genuine gratitude for years of dedicated service. The sound echoed off the surrounding buildings, creating a wall of appreciation that seemed to embrace the couple as they prepared for their final official walk together. Catherine felt tears finally beginning to fall, though she made no attempt to hide them. Throughout her years as a working royal, she had mastered the art of emotional control in public settings. But today felt different. Today called for authenticity rather than composure. The tears were not of sadness alone, but of overwhelming gratitude for the journey she and William had shared with the British people. William placed his arm around his wife's shoulders, a gesture that was both protective and supportive. He too was visibly moved by the outpouring of affection surrounding them. As someone who had grown up in the public eye, he had experienced many different types of public reaction over the years. But this felt uniquely genuine, a true expression of mutual love and respect that had developed over years of shared experiences and genuine service. They began their slow walk toward the waiting car, but this wasn't the formal, measured pace of typical royal departures. They stopped frequently to shake hands, accept flowers, and exchange brief words with individuals in the crowd. Each interaction was personal and meaningful, a final opportunity to connect with people who had been an essential part of their royal journey. A young mother pushed forward with her daughter, a girl of perhaps 8 years old who had been born with a rare medical condition. Catherine had met them during one of her hospital visits 3 years earlier, and she remembered their story immediately. The little girl, now thriving thanks to treatments that had been funded through royal charitable initiatives, presented Catherine with a drawing she had made specifically for this day. It showed 2 figures labeled Prince William and Princess Catherine surrounded by hearts and the words, "Thank you for caring about me." These personal moments continued as they made their way through the crowd, each encounter reinforcing the human connections that had made their royal service meaningful. They met teachers whose schools had benefited from their educational initiatives, healthcare workers whose research had been supported through royal foundations, and veterans whose lives had been changed by William's mental health advocacy. The walk to their car took nearly an hour, much longer than anyone had planned, but nobody seemed impatient or concerned about the delay. This extended farewell felt necessary, a proper conclusion to years of relationship building and mutual service. The formalities of royal protocol gave way to the simple human need to acknowledge shared experiences and express gratitude. As they finally approached their vehicle, both William and Catherine turned back toward the Abbey and the crowd one final time. The sight that greeted them was extraordinary. Hundreds of people holding candles that had appeared spontaneously throughout the afternoon, creating a gentle glow in the gathering dusk. The candlelight reflected off the Abbey's ancient stones, creating an atmosphere of sacred beauty that captured the profound emotion of the moment. William raised his hand in a final wave, and Catherine blew a kiss toward the assembled crowd. These simple gestures, captured by photographers and broadcast around the world, would become the defining image of their graceful goodbye. The photographs would show not just 2 people leaving their official roles, but a genuine moment of love and gratitude shared between royalty and the people they had served. As their car pulled away from Westminster Abbey for the final time in their official capacity, both William and Catherine felt a profound sense of completion. The day had exceeded their expectations in every way, transforming what could have been a somber farewell into a celebration of human connection and shared purpose. Through the car windows, they watched the crowd slowly beginning to disperse, many people reluctant to leave the scene of such an emotionally powerful experience. The candlelight continued to flicker in the growing darkness, creating a lasting image that would remain etched in the memories of everyone present. Social media was already filling with photos and videos of the day's events, but those digital captures could never fully convey the authentic emotion that had filled every moment. The drive back to their residence was quiet, both of them processing the overwhelming response they had received. The decision to step back from royal duties had been made after months of careful consideration and family discussions, but until today, they hadn't fully understood how their choice would be received by the public. The love and support expressed throughout the day had exceeded their most optimistic expectations. Catherine reached for William's hand as London's familiar landmarks passed by their windows. These streets had been the backdrop for countless royal engagements over the years, walkabouts that had introduced them to remarkable individuals, charity events that had raised millions for important causes, and ceremonial occasions that had connected them to centuries of royal tradition. Each familiar sight carried memories of meaningful encounters and shared experiences. In the months ahead, they would focus their attention on the personal family matter that had necessitated this transition, giving their complete dedication to challenges that required their presence in ways their royal duties never could. But they would also begin exploring new ways to serve, approaches that might be less formal but potentially even more impactful than their previous roles. The evening news broadcasts were already calling their farewell one of the most emotionally powerful royal moments in modern history. Commentators struggled to find words adequate to describe the genuine affection and mutual respect that had been displayed throughout the day. International media coverage emphasized the grace and dignity with which William and Catherine had handled an incredibly difficult transition. As their car turned into the gates of their residence, both William and Catherine felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The day had proven that their years of service had created lasting positive change and genuine relationships that would endure long after their official roles ended. They had said goodbye with grace, surrounded by love, and confident in their decision to prioritize the personal responsibilities that mattered most. The world had witnessed their graceful goodbye, And hearts around the globe had been touched by the authentic emotion and genuine human connection that had defined every moment. Their legacy would live on not in formal ceremonies or official duties, but in the countless lives they had touched and the lasting change they had helped create through years of dedicated, heartfelt service. Tonight they would return home to their children, ready to begin a new chapter that honored both their past service and their future priorities. The farewell was complete, but their story of love, service, and family would continue in new and meaningful ways.